So our next presenter is the managing director for Rocketmill. He comes all the way to us from Brighton. He's going to tell us why marketing's fascination with data may be killing brands. Let me bring up Sam Garrity.
We didn't get a hug, did we? Hey? That music makes me want to crack out a dad dance, but I think we'll save you guys from that. I want to talk to you today about why I believe our use of data in digital marketing is damaging our brands. Now, for me, this is a story that began 20 years ago, just up the road from here, as I commenced my career in our national press. Now, I spent around a decade working for brands like the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, and the Express newspaper group. And that journey for me began in editorial. And I have to tell you, working in the editorial environment were some of the most exhilarating days of my entire career. We used to take 2 million words into our building every single day, and we would distill that down to a newspaper of 20,000 words, covering a myriad of topics, and all, very importantly, carefully stewarded by a human editor. We would then successfully distribute this as a product to the newsstands across the UK and parts of Europe. Now, the impact of this huge undertaking upon our readership was that we were exposing them to a wide breadth of opinion and subject matter, if you like, giving them a wide lens view on what was going on in the world. For our advertisers, this was broadcast media. That meant they were talking to and communicating with an awful lot of people, many of whom that sat outside of their core target audiences. On top of this, it was jolly expensive. And you know, that expense, that guaranteed commitment from our advertisers and right the way through the advertising supply chain, whether that was time and talent in the creative, whether it was diligence in the media planning, aggression shown in the purchasing of the media, and finally, we, as journalists on the editorial floor, we were the brand safety guardians. We would ensure, for instance, that if British Airways was running an ad in an edition which had, for instance, plane crash editorial, that we would whip them out. Now, because of the effort, the commitment that was required from our advertisers, there was an element within this, and the trust that they had in our brand, our newspaper, there was an element of trust that passed from our readership towards the brands that advertised with us. Nowadays, I'm the managing director of a digital marketing agency that I founded nearly 10 years ago. And in the context of this talk, what that has afforded me is a front row seat in seeing media move from a place where we produce newspapers, one product covering a myriad of topics, distributed to lots of people, today where media is highly personalised towards you. Now let me explain what I mean. This is Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of the world's largest distributor of news. And here he is explaining that a squirrel dying in front of your house may be of more relevance to your interests in that moment than people dying in Africa. Now, he's not being naughty here, he's not being controversial, he is just explaining their model. It's about relevance. Algorithms have replaced human editors. Think about your news feeds. It is perpetuating more of the things that you like, dwell upon, and share. And it's not just Facebook that have created, if you like, these algorithmic businesses. 7 of the 13 companies that beat the S&P 500 average consecutively every single year for the past 5 years, they are what I would call algorithmic businesses. And I saw a quote from Eric Schmidt recently of Alphabet explaining that in his opinion, pretty soon it's going to be impossible for any of us to consume content that in some way was not personalised towards us. And what this is doing for us is it's giving us a narrower viewport on the world. There's a narrowing of perspective. You probably believe that you consume a fair representation of the broader picture, but you don't. We now live in echo chambers that are entirely of our own design. And these echo chambers do a wonderful job of helping us understand why Trump and Brexit were two of the most impactful moments in recent living memory. Because if you were a liberal-leaning thinker, through the lens of your echo chamber, your newsfeed, you probably thought that everybody was aligned to your way of thinking. And they weren't. You were blindsided. In fact, there's probably an argument to say that the way that we use data in our marketing now, alongside the personalisation of media, is the reason that we've put the nuclear codes in the hands of the Donald. But I'll save that for another talk. Now, why do you think these businesses have created these algorithmic models? In the instance of Facebook, because it differs from company to company, but in the instance of Facebook, I think we can distill it down into two core pillars. Firstly, it's about getting you hooked. The reward center in your brain is something called the nucleus accumbens, and it's stimulated by all the good stuff: food, sex, money, social acceptance. When you get a like or positive affirmation on Facebook, that same area is stimulated. As a result, Facebook is really, really addictive. But secondly, it's a very smart business strategy. Think about what you share with Facebook: your name, where you live, your age, your relationship status, all of your preferences. And if you're anything like my aunt, a typical older oversharer, and I really didn't want this to be live streamed today, she's probably watching, it knows everything you've had to eat in the past 3 months as well. Now, what this does, think about it, from Facebook's perspective, is it allows them to identify you, to successfully put you in a box and sell you off to a whole bunch of relevant advertisers. So the personalisation of media and the way that we use data in marketing has allowed us to go from a place where we produce newspapers en masse covering a whole range of topics where we'd possibly buy a page at great expense, to a place now where we, us in this room, are buying people, and we're buying them in real time across a gamut of media, and we're buying them for pennies. And I believe this shift, this fundamental shift in the way that we market, is having quite significant impacts. I believe that in certain quarters we are destroying the internet by providing appalling experiences online, and as a result we are damaging brands. And the catalyst for some of this started quite some time ago. The ability to buy people in real time for pennies taught a generation of marketers that digital is cheap. We simultaneously taught the same marketers that everything in digital can be tracked. So is it any surprise that your marketing campaigns now are based entirely upon the return on ad spend, the cost per lead, the cost per acquisition, the cost per sale? What, if any, importance are we placing upon the moment that a human being engages with your creative, with your campaign? Let's have a quick look at some of the mechanics. This is the mechanics that sit behind a campaign advertiser side on something like a programmatic campaign. This is kind of the engine that sits behind what I'm talking about. We get first-party data. I'm going to keep this really simple. Cookies that you get from people visiting your website. Third-party data, cookies from publishers' websites, people visiting them. We combine these data sets and we plumb them into our data management platform, our DMP, where we cleverly segment our audience based upon their propensity to do business with us, i.e. their potential value to our campaign. From here, that fuels the central core of our ad tech stack, our campaign management platform, which along with our creative, we access the market, a dramatic, gigantic market of media owners buying people in real time for pennies. And the maturity model that I see that sits behind this looks something like this. I've already explained we're fascinated by ROI. That's the only thing that drives us. So quite naturally, when you look at a digital campaign, it starts at the end of the funnel. That final click, that moment where a user is exhibiting a behavior that's about to have real meaningful ROI on your ad spend. So it's quite natural that we optimize that to its fullest extent. And this is where we're getting our first party data, people coming to our site. We then go to the market and we look for people, imagine these, we're not going to call them cookies now, they're people. We look for people that are exactly the same. We literally mirror them. And then we remarket ourselves and go out to display throughout the third party, through the funnel. Now there's merit to this model because it de-risks the investment. It pretty much guarantees the return on the ad spend, and the minute the data deviates from plan A, you can rein things in. But I would argue this is dangerous. We are placing brands in a local maximum, a place where we're at risk of over-optimizing them, almost, if you like, putting them in their own echo chambers. And for me, this is the marketing equivalent of Tinder. It's a whole series of one-off engagements. Surely, we as marketers owe it to brands to develop more meaningful relationships with their consumers and not a series of one-night stands. Brands must grow audiences, and to do this, they need to get comfortable talking to people they've never met before and get better at the nuanced art of persuasion. Because we as humans, I'm telling you, we make complex emotional decisions about the brands that we invest in. And data and programmatic, they've got a role to play, but as a group, we need to double down on our commitment to great creative, real diligence throughout the supply chain in terms of our media planning, our activation, and finally, really, really importantly, our publishers must step up and protect the environment that they provide for their readership. And this is why they need to do it, because we have used data around things like the viewability debate that still is ongoing. And I understand viewability is driven, the debate is driven because we want accountability and quality. But the repercussions of it are really quite different and negative. This is the Mail Online, one of the best publishers out there, one of the most successful, a former employer of mine, massacring their editorial environment, the experience they give their users in pursuit of revenue, because they want their ads above the fold, seen, viewed, done. What is the impact of this? Well, if you look at it from a data perspective, do you know what? It probably looks pretty good. The publisher thinks my ads, my inventory's being used, it's getting seen, I meet my viewability criteria, tick, tick, we hit business plan, the sales team did their job. The advertiser probably thinks, well, on the core metrics, I'm doing well because I bought people in real time for pennies. We advertised to 6 million people in terms of impressions, and we generated 60,000 interactions that had a meaningful return on the investment. So we did our job. But at what expense to the brands, to the publisher, and to the advertiser? I would challenge you, when was the last time programmatic display gave you a drumming gorilla moment? There's deliberately no music in that, by the way. I wanted you to play it over in your minds. You might argue, for instance, that the John Lewis TV creative at Christmas, I shouldn't really have said TV, but that creative gets more traction online now than it does on TV. But I can guarantee you the commitment shown from the John Lewis team, the apparent £1 million they spend on that creative every single year, that is born because it's made for an expensive television advertising slot. When was the last time you saw anybody show any level of similar commitment within programmatic display? I believe we face really, genuinely quite dire consequences if we don't up our game across the entire digital marketing supply chain. Data's kind of, if we recap a little bit, data's allowed us to track everything. As a result, quite naturally, we base our campaigns around their return upon investment. The marketing behavior that leads to is that we de-risk our campaigns. And we're hurting the publishers we so desperately need to build us valuable audiences to advertise to. We're hurting them by data around things like the ongoing viewability debate. And do you know what? People have had enough. These impacts I'm talking about, they're happening right now. People have had enough. They're literally turning us off. A recent CMO Council study which interviewed people in the UK, the US and Canada, found that 40% of those polled had installed ad blocking software, with a further 15% due to install it imminently. They're literally turning us off. We're fortunate we've got Rory Sutherland here with us today. He's talking in a moment's time. And Rory's kindly allowed me to share a tale that I've seen Rory sharing on a previous occasion. It really lovely, it sums up my message. And it's a small tale about bees. Bees do something called a waggle dance. And they do this upon returning to the hive after collecting pollen or nectar. And the reason they do this waggle dance, as you can see here, a kind of figure of 8 dance where they vibrate, is that they're conveying vital information to the rest of the hive about where the honey and nectar is, or sorry, pollen and nectar is, in relation to how fast they flew or how far they flew, and the trajectory in relationship to the sun's position. Now, you would rightly expect, wouldn't you, that every single bee would be obedient and follow the waggle dance in pursuit of full optimization of the collection of pollen and nectar for the hive. But they don't. A certain percentage of them completely ignore it. Instead, these rogue bees, these brave, bold, creative bees, they go out into the local landscape, surveying, looking for new sources of nectar and pollen. And scientists have learned, if it wasn't for these other bees, these creative, bold bees, these outliers, that hive would get trapped in a local maximum. It would actually starve to death. Now, I believe our use of data currently in certain quarters of digital marketing is leading us to potentially over-optimize our hive. And I'm pretty damn sure that if we don't start to show a level of commitment that I witnessed when I first joined our industry 20 years ago and I fell in love with it, if we don't exhibit that same level of commitment throughout the entire digital advertising supply chain, then I believe we will fail to keep our hive alive. Thank you.